Good day, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. This session will begin at the top of the hour.
Good day, everyone. We're now at the beginning of our Mentor Connect webinar titled Preparing Forms for Your NSF ATE Proposal. As you know, we're using the interface Adobe Connect today, and let me just point out a single feature to you. On the upper right of your screen is the chat window, and please use that today to forward your questions or comments that you might have. We'll get to those at a variety of question breaks during today's webinar. So it's an easy system to use. Just go ahead and please use the chat. Now it's my privilege to advance the slides and to introduce our lead presenter, Elaine Kraft. She's the principal investigator of the Mentor Connect project and the director of the South Carolina ATE Center of Excellence. Welcome, Elaine. It's a pleasure to have you here as always. Will you take over the webinar and introduce your co-presenters?
Thank you, Mike. We're delighted to be here today, and hello, everyone. As Mike said, I am Elaine Kraft. It is my privilege to be the principal investigator for the Mentor Connect project. Thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar is designed to guide you through the preparation of the forms associated with submission of an NSF grant proposal. While these forms are not unique to the NSF ATE program, some of the instructions for how you should complete the forms are specific to ATE. Our goal is to help you prepare competitive grant proposals and avoid common mistakes as you prepare and submit your proposal. The Mentor Connect team will provide guidance for completing the required forms, but please be reminded that we are not speaking on behalf of the National Science Foundation. The opinions we express are our own. We will share information from NSF publications as well as from our own experience. Joining me today are my colleagues Ellen Haas and Charlotte Forrest. Ellen and Charlotte are both co-principal investigators for the Mentor Connect project. Charlotte also serves as project manager for Mentor Connect. The Mentor Connect team collectively has many years of experience completing the forms that we will be discussing with you today. Now, using the chat box feature that Mike told you about, let us know how many people are in the room with you viewing this webinar. We appreciate your help in determining how many people are actually in the audience today. Great. It looks like you're all finding the chat box, and thank you so much. Keep entering your responses. Now let's get to the webinar overview. First, I would like to give you an overview of what we will be discussing today. We will be covering forms and related documents that are part of all NSF ATE proposals. You can see from this diagram that the heart of any proposal is the project description. Some people refer to this as the narrative, and we may use both terms during today's presentation. The project summary can be thought of as the elevator speech for your project. It is a short, one-page overview of your project. Ellen will share some information about these two project components later in the webinar, but they are not our emphasis today. Also, there are two important forms that we will not be discussing today: budget forms and the budget justification. These particularly critical components of proposal preparation were covered in a separate webinar that we provided earlier this year. The budget and budget justification webinar recording and a tutorial derived from the webinar are available on the Mentor Connect website if you happen to miss that broadcast. Charlotte will tell you more about how to access Mentor Connect resources later in this program. So, what are we discussing today? The cover sheet, project data form, biographical sketches, current and pending support forms, facilities and other resources form, references cited, data management plan, list of collaborators, and that's a new one, and the supplemental documents, which are somewhat like appendices to a proposal. Each item serves a specific purpose. We will walk you through each one to help you understand what is required. Our desire is to help you better understand these forms and how to avoid some of the errors frequently seen by program officers and reviewers. The bottom line is that a careful preparation of your forms contributes to a proposal that is more competitive overall. I thought an example might help you understand why forms are not a trivial part of your grant proposal development. The numbers in this example are from a typical project proposal that was submitted to the NSF ATE program several years ago. The full proposal was 86 pages long. Of the 86 pages, the project description or narrative filled 15 pages, which is the maximum allowable length for this component of an ATE proposal. The project summary is restricted to 1 page. Budget forms for a 3-year project will take up 4 pages, which is a budget for each year and a cumulative budget page for the entire proposal. The budget justification filled the maximum 3 pages. Forms and supplementary documents made up the remaining 63 pages or 73% of the proposal used in this example. Wow, now that's a lot of pages of forms. So one piece of advice we have for you today is to get started on these forms right away. They take some time and need to be prepared thoughtfully. Now, Mike, we want to find out a little more about who is in our audience today. Please poll the audience to see how many participants are Mentor Connect participants, which means they're either mentors, faculty, or college personnel who are working with a Mentor Connect team. Oh, we're delighted to have so many of our Mentor Connect participants in the audience today. We'll also extend a special welcome to other participants. If you are not already working directly with Mentor Connect to learn about grant writing and how to increase the competitiveness of your NSF ATE proposal, we encourage you to investigate this opportunity. Now, I will turn the program over to Charlotte to get us started.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Elaine. The first thing that I want to do is to introduce you to several different resources. 2 of those invaluable resources you will need to refer to over and over as you go through this proposal preparation process. These 2 resources are the Advanced Technological Education or ATE program solicitation and the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, often known by the acronym of PAPPG, or you may hear personnel call it the PAP Guide. While the PAP Guide covers everything that you need to know on how to submit a proposal and manage a project at any division at the National Science Foundation, the ATE solicitation includes information that is critical to ensuring that you are meeting all of the requirements that are specific to this program. Read the solicitation. This document is due to be published sometime in the early summer months this year, pending there are no programmatic changes. A special note on the ATE solicitation, we recommend that once available that you print this document, you read it, and always have it handy while you prepare any grant proposal for the program. We also suggest that not only the grants office, but that all faculty are reading this important document. The solicitation documents are updated regularly, Typical of ATE is a 3-year solicitation, and so far there is no active solicitation for fall 2017 grant submission. However, once again, that is due to come out in early June. So before you think about completing all of the forms that Elaine indicated will be required, we want to make sure that you're meeting as a team and thinking about the following items. Deciding on one person to handle input into the FastLane system through NSF, that your principal investigators and what's called AOR, or Authorized Organizational Representatives, are able to, or will be willing to, cross-check and check off completeness before your submission, and that you register your institution within FastLane and get a FastLane ID. Identify who the AOR is, and you should be, if you haven't already, deciding on this now or starting really early. Note that you can park items in FastLane, and nothing is final until you hit submit. You actually have to go through the process of technically submitting twice over. So again, you can start your forms process now. And lastly, get started sooner than later. You'll hear us say that several times during the webinar, but we sincerely believe that one of the keys to success is getting everything done early so that there are no surprises in the end. I want to bring everyone's attention to the screen you see here. We want to let you know that throughout the webinar you will see a light bulb icon. Throughout the webinar, these indicate tips and tricks from the Mentor Connect team to you. These are things we've learned the hard way and would like to draw your attention to just a few takeaways as we go through the process, making it easier for you. So, how do you access information? Again, reading the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide is vital. This document is issued by NSF, and as you can see on the screen, there are a variety of ways to navigate through the document that is available at nsf.gov. Website access ensures that you have the most up-to-date and recent copy. Notable portions of the PAP guide include the proposal preparation section, where you will find things like the proposal preparation checklist, for example, helping you kind of line by line get through your proposal. Seemingly minor information in fine print can make or break your proposal. One important example is something like proposal pagination instructions. Pagination and formatting guidelines are vital when you're filling in forms for your grant proposal. This relates in alignment with our discussion about several components in forms today. So keep that in mind. Again, one of my favorite ways to access the PAP guide on the NSF website is through the PDF format. And also, if you sign up online to receive publications from NSF, then you will automatically receive links to these important documents. This one, for example, is updated once a year and typically is sent out in November or December with a January action date. And you'll see at the bottom of the this version that that date is indicated. So now, although the PAP guide has all of the regulations and everything that you need to know, the FastLane information, or the place where, or dashboard where you're inputting information and completing your grant forms, is aligned much differently on screen. FastLane, again, as a dashboard, it's used to submit proposal information, make changes to your existing proposal, and even change personnel. However, in the future, research.gov will become the repository for all information and the preferred entry point for NSF grant proposals. So stay up to date on that. But at this time, we do recommend Fastlane. We recommend Fastlane for a number of reasons, but most of all, ease of use, as well as being able to input all data at once in line with the ATE solicitation. The ATE program is a little bit different, and there are some auxiliary forms that have to be completed, so Fastlane is your best friend when inputting this information. But on the other hand, both NSF.gov Fastlane or grants.gov can be used. Once you enter information or data, it will look different in hard copy or PDF format outside of the system that we will show you screens of today. But for the purposes of form completion, we think it'll be helpful for you to see exactly how it looks on the screen and exactly where you will enter information. In a couple of examples, you'll see the print-ready version. So to begin any given form, you will be clicking on the Go button to complete those forms as indicated here, and we will go through each of these forms today individually. There are 2 supplementary document entries that apply to first-time proposers, and we've indicated here with arrows what those are. We will also be discussing a new requirement with the single copy document that is required. There are a few items that you do not have to worry about when completing forms. These include a mentoring plan, deviation authorization, and suggested reviewers, just to name a few. Also notice that you can view the latest or updated saved information signified by date. You'll see here on the screen next to cover sheet it says Save 3/30/2016. This is particularly nice, and Mentor Connect encourages proposers to add and save as much information as early as possible. So, if you're working as a team or what have you, you can see your progress as you move along. NSF has also implemented a new automated compliance check function so that your proposal will not be accepted if required forms are not completely submitted, which is it's good on one hand, but on the other hand, if you're not in compliance and haven't completed forms, your proposal can get kicked back to you or not submitted at all. There is a resource through nsf.gov and the Mentor Connect Resource Library that is a 5-page compliance checklist document. And this particular document is going to give you all of the information on what is required in order for your proposal to be submitted. So now, the first form is your cover sheet. You will, again, be entering information directly into Fastlane, and on the back end, you will get information summarized into one print-ready doc. So the cover sheet provides NSF with a concise summary of all administrative data about your proposal. It's going to certify that all of the statements that you've made in your proposal are true and that they will follow federal guidelines. And lastly, it provides electronic signature of PI and your institution, giving permission to submit. So when the AOR, we use a lot of acronyms, but that stands for Authorized Organizational Representative or other personnel at your college who is responsible for submitting the grant proposal, clicks that they agree to the required certifications that is deemed to be an electronic signature for the purpose of the proposal. I just want to make a couple notes. One, there's no actual or electronic signature that is signed or inserted into the document. On the other hand, it's just kind of a check item for the person with authorized organizational representative authority. Second, the AOR gives the PI or principal investigator and everyone else who is working through the grant proposal, including business office personnel, permission to work on several different levels in the grant proposal process. You must get all the way to the end of the page to get to that last authorization question. Only the AOR has permission, granted by your college of course, to submit or check off authorization in this system. This has changed a bit. In the past, there was a window for error or, an extension on deadline. I think it used to be like 5 days. But now it's vital that this is done before the proposal deadline. Your college must submit the AOR certification by the solicitation deadline. I just wanted to make that clarification because we do get several questions about that, and there are no exceptions. So the day that you submit that, your PI submits information, the organizational representative really needs to be ready to sign off. So what you see here on the screen is a sample cover sheet that has been completed. The majority of ATE proposals, including small grants to those new to ATE, will be in the ATE program track. And I'm going to pull down my little arrow and try to use that as we go along. And you can see that here. Here you see Division of Undergraduate Education, or DUE, ATE projects. This is what you will indicate. If in doubt about this, ask your mentor or your NSF program officer. Getting your proposal in the right category for review is very important. Projects invariably take much longer than you think they will. Even if you think you can finish your work sooner, it's a good idea to be mindful of your the time that you're requesting for completion of the grant. A typical grant is going to run a proposed duration of 36 months or 3 years. So here where my arrow is, you'll see proposed duration. We recommend for those new to ATE that you extend it to a 36-month period. This gives you time to finish out your project benchmarks at the end of the grant, and really, make sure that all of your goals and objectives are completed. Similarly, the amount requested in your grant proposal is also vital. Here, for example, you see that this is a small grant and it's $200,000 or less. So you would need to indicate that here. Please be mindful of the indirect costs and other expenses that could carry your total over $200,000. If your grant is over $200,000 total, your information will be reviewed in project discipline categories other than a small grants category. This essentially will reduce your chances of funding by about 40 or 50%. So again, all considered, at the end of the day, your cover sheet should read something under $200,000. A note about proposal numbers, which you see here in the corner. Your proposal number becomes your grant number if the proposal is funded. So knowing your proposal grant number is very helpful at every stage of your process. Really, once you get this cover sheet activated. This is how you locate your proposal when you work in FastLane. This is also how you identify your college when communicating with your program officers. And lastly, just a note for those who are MentorConnect participants, we ask for this number to help track and assist you through your proposal award process. So keep this in mind. Start dates, we get lots of questions about start dates for your grant, which you'll see indicated with my little green arrow here. NSF is most likely to set your date for your project work on a date that you have selected. So we ask that you consider what might work for your business office, your programs, etc. Some like to start dates to align with the fiscal year, for example. Our college, we start on a July 1 fiscal year date, so that's going to be, most typical for our grants. Some are June, some are July, some are August. Consider the time it will take to get faculty release time worked out and when you want it to start. So for example, if you receive your award notification in May and you selected a start date of, say, September 1, you will have all summer to get this worked out. Choosing a mid-semester start date will most of the time make it difficult or impossible to get people started and working on your grant. So keep that in mind. Don't choose a date that is too early in the calendar year. This could result in a receipt of your award notice on or after your requested start date. You don't want to start your grant off behind, so this is just, again, another note to help you along. And lastly, the start date can be changed, but it's not a super easy process. So we recommend that you, again, align with your team and make sure that you have a start date in mind. A couple of other notes. On the screen, you will notice that there are several check boxes down here under where it says this proposal includes any of the items below. As you submit to the ATE track, the model here shows the appropriate selections. Particular importance is the box that says beginning investigator and that down here at the bottom that says funding mechanism. All of NSF grants essentially are research, but our practice has been that the other than rapid or eager category of research is what you should select. All in all, this cover page isn't a form that you directly insert information. You submit information elsewhere, and FastLane populates the cover sheet. It populates it with information that you submit in sections that are a little bit buried as you begin working through your proposal. If not done carefully, you can end up with missing information. You can end up with PI or co-PI names on the cover sheet with no email addresses, phone numbers, or other information that is printed on the cover sheet. And you'll notice that information is indicated down here at the bottom. To a reviewer, incomplete information on this cover sheet can look a bit sloppy, so our recommendation is to do this slowly, check your work, look at this print-ready document, and you can do all of that prior to submission, of course. What you see is basically a second page of your cover sheet or a certification page, and this is what it looks like once it's printed out. Again, this is not what you will see when you're completing your form in the text boxes. So just as a recap, we want to give you a couple of takeaways. And remember, when you see that light bulb throughout the webinar, there's some good stuff that you may want to write down. It is important to remember that the cover page is where you will enter the title of your project. A lot of people don't realize they need a title until they're into the process. And from our experience, we definitely recommend not using NSF in the title and striving for something really descriptive, innovative, and meaningful for the work that you set out to do. For example, a title like Expanding Teaching and Learning to Improve Success Rates in Manufacturing. Or you may even choose a title like Bridge to Nanotechnology. Don't try to be too cute or demeaning when you're thinking about a title. For example, we use this all the time. Calling a title such as calling a faculty development project turning bad technician educators into good ones. I don't think that a panel review of your peers would like to see that. So keep that in mind as you think of a title. Acronyms are also a little bit problematic, and you don't want to create a situation where you're having to clarify what you're meaning by your title. Reviewers you may not get that chance to answer those questions. And again, let me reiterate that missing information for your PIs and co-PIs sends a message to reviewers that you haven't paid attention to detail. The next form that I would like to go over quickly is the project data form. This form provides the reader or reviewer a quick glimpse of the discipline, the type of college submitting the proposal, potential numbers, and kinds of populations who will be impacted by your work. And it's also an indication of the kind of proposal that you're writing in broader terms. Pay attention to the section that number 4 here, other institutions. This is an area where you are free to describe organizations, businesses, partner colleges, or even high school partners that you have that are helping you accomplish the mission of your grant. If your plan includes working with others outside of your college to achieve objectives, this outreach and collaboration can be viewed positively by reviewers, and this is where you would input that information. Be thoughtful about the number of impacted people that you put in the various categories listed here. Reviewers do like to see that, and you definitely do not want to underreport your anticipated impact of your program. You'll want to ask yourself, if a reviewer were to divide the amount of money that I'm requesting by the number of people that you anticipate impacting, will this project look like a good investment? Give some thought to the numbers you report in this section and keep a record of your calculations, as reviewers and program officers may ask for details prior to funding you. Thank goodness. This is a freebie. What you see on the screen is a table of contents that FastLane automates for you. So this is one form that you do not have to complete. Keep in mind that where you input data will look a little bit different than this print-ready page, but this is what you're striving for. And this is also what Elaine highlighted earlier about the number of pages that you will submit in all once you've completed your grant proposal. So up till now, we've given you mostly an overview, mostly some background information on what to expect as you go through the initial process, but we are ready to entertain any questions that you might have. So I see that there have been a couple entered into the chat box, and we will address those at this time. And again, if you have more questions, feel free to enter those. So the one question is, how do we change a start date? And this question, I think, would probably be most appropriate to ask my colleague Elaine if she could address
that. Can you hear me, Charlotte?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. I was just unmuting. You would need to contact your program officer for specifics on how to change a project start date. You need to think about that very carefully, as Charlotte indicated, and work with your program officer on that question. It may be that the program officer in discussion with you decides that it really doesn't need to be changed. One thing about NSF ATE projects is that they do provide the opportunity for a no-cost extension at the end of your project grant period, and that gives you up to an additional year to complete the objectives of your project. So if you should end up sort of on short time, for instance, a colleague of mine put an April 1st start date on her proposal, and on April the 1st was notified she got her grant award. Well, she went into panic mode a little bit because she thought she'd have some ramp-up time. And but once she understood that even if she took some time to get started after April the 1st, that she was going to be able to extend that project a little longer at the end so that she would have enough time to get her work done. So there's not a way that you can go into Fastlane and do that, so you would just have to work with your program officer to determine whether it needs to be done, and if so, how to go about doing it.
Thank you, Elaine. That's a really solid answer for that particular question. We have another question, and this is a good question. Can I complete these forms offline, or do I have to be in the Fastlane system? And I think, and please, Ellen, Elaine, chime in, of course. I think that the short answer to this question is no. The system is set up to kind of take you through a process where you're saving information as you go, and then once you finish certain portions, information is populated. Elaine or Ellen, do you have any additional feedback on that question?
Well, one thing I would say is that there are some forms that allow you to prepare your text and then cut and paste it into a text box, for instance, or to upload a form. You can print these out and get your work done, offline, and then you've got it all laid out so you can put it in into the system. But ultimately, it all has to be uploaded into the system. So it's really not one set answer. The different forms are handled different ways. The ones that are templates in Fastlane, where you actually insert a name or a number into the form, will have to be done that way. And some others you can upload documents. Ellen, has that been your experience?
Yes, that has been my experience. I would agree.
Okay. All right, thank you. And with that, I think we really appreciate the questions that are coming in, and we will address those as we go. But we do want to be sure that we have time to get into what I feel is the most exciting portion of the webinar, where we're talking through some of the nuts and bolts forms that you will need to complete. So at this time, I would like to pass the microphone to Ellen, who will share some information and dig a little deeper into the components.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you all for your questions. We do note we haven't addressed all of them in chat, but we will have a few more question breaks where we will be able to do so. We just wanted to move forward through some of the content now, and perhaps some of what we are delivering can address those as well. So here we move to our project summary. So this is essentially your one-pager. It's a summary of your project that includes an overview and, most importantly, a statement on the intellectual merit and a statement on the broader impacts of your proposed activities. Do note that your proposal will not be accepted if it is submitted without a project summary, or if the project summary does not address both the intellectual merit and the broader impacts of your proposal. So Fastlane will prompt you to enter this information into 3 separate text boxes: your overview, intellectual merit, and broader impacts. You're required to submit information in all 3 text boxes, and your project summary in total should be no more than 1 page. The total number of characters that will be accepted, totaling all 3 text boxes, is 4,600 characters. So if you prepare your project summary in Word, you can then cut and paste the appropriate pieces into the text boxes. But do note you will want to proofread it when you've cut and pasted. There sometimes can be difficulty with character counts. And if you get repeated errors, you may want to resort to typing the text directly into the text boxes. Also, sometimes possessives, for example, can translate into bizarre characters like $signs, so you do want to go in and proofread and make sure the text looks correct. You will need to work within these text boxes. NSF will only accept the project summary as an uploaded separate document if it contains special characters such as mathematical symbols or Greek letters. So if your proposal requires the use of these characters, you need to check the box on the project summary screen that indicates you'd upload your project summary as a supplemental document. But do note it is really not typical for AT project summaries to have special characters or to be uploaded. So do plan to use these text boxes to input your project summary. So the project summary, again, broken down into 3 parts: an overview, a description of the activity that would result in the proposal if it were funded, and a statement of the objectives or methods to be used. It should clearly indicate in the first few sentences the disciplinary focus of the project, the kinds of activities proposed, whether it be curriculum adaptation or professional development, and the primary audience for those activities. You need to get right to the point of your grant and explain your proposal's objectives and what you will do to achieve those objectives. As a general rule, you do not want to use this space for building a rationale for your project, describing your college or community environment, or stating the amount of money that you're requesting. It should be a concise overview. You want to consider it your elevator speech, and if this is all that someone reads about your project, they should be able to understand what you're trying to do and your desired outcomes. Let me move back. So when addressing intellectual merit and broader impacts, be sure that you understand what NSF means by those terms by studying the criteria provided in the request for proposals, the RFP, and the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, the PAPPG. Again, throwing these acronyms at you. You do not have to address all of the criteria listed by NSF in the ATE program, but you should plan to align with at least some of what has been provided to prospective grantees. So the statement on intellectual merit should describe the potential of the proposed activities to advance knowledge, and the statement on broader impact should describe the potential of the proposed activity to benefit society. And the ATE request for proposals will help to refine this criteria further in a section on merit review principles and criteria, where you can use some of the examples of questions that are listed there to address these factors, such as under intellectual merit, does the project have the potential for improving student learning in science or engineering technician education programs, as an example? Or under broader impacts, has an assessment of workforce needs for technicians been conducted? Does the project work with employers to address their current and future needs? Does the project promote diversity in the technical workforce? So be sure to pay close attention to these criteria when crafting your intellectual merit and broader impact statements. So moving forward to the project description. So this is the heart of your proposal, and it should provide a clear statement of the work and activities you're undertaking. It should address what you want to do, why you want to do it, how you plan to do it, how you will know if you are successful, and what benefits and impacts will result from a successful project. So that means including information on the project's motivating rationale, goals, objectives, deliverables, and activities, as well as incorporating a timeline, management plan, the roles and responsibilities of the PIs, co-PIs, and other senior personnel, a sustainability plan for after the period of NSF funding ends, an evaluation plan, and a dissemination plan, all in 15 pages. So again, you'll want to pay close attention to addressing intellectual merit and broader impacts, as I talked about earlier. And do note that your project description must include as a separate section within the narrative labeled broader impacts, where you can address the broader impacts of your proposed work. On the screen, as you see, here's the actual form in FastLane for project descriptions. So your project description would be done all offline and then uploaded and converted. It can be uploaded in a variety of word processor files, and FastLane will convert it to PDF. And you will want to double check your upload once it is in FastLane just to make sure there were no issues in conversion. So some takeaways on the project description, just a few tips. They may seem like no-brainers, but they're actually crucial to your proposal success. You'll want to pay attention to font size and layout and the size of your document. As I mentioned before, the length of the project description must fit into 15 pages with 1-inch margins on all sides. So once uploaded, again, it's a good idea to check that you do not exceed these guidelines, this amount. While the PAPPG allows for a minimum font of 10-point in specific fonts such as Arial or Courier, Mentor Connect recommends that you use an 11 or 12-point standard font to ensure readability. You'll want to use section headings, bullets, or charts to ensure a clear proposal and readability, and note that any visuals must be included in the 15-page limitation. And again, keep in mind your reviewers. They may be reading up to 12 proposals. You may be the last one. They're reading late at night. And if what you've submitted uses a minimum font size and has a poor layout or doesn't clearly address the topics in the solicitation, it won't encourage a good rating. As another point on formatting, do not use automated endnotes. You can number your references and then list them in a separate reference section, which Elaine will go over later in the webinar. So again, references are a separate section and do not count to your 15-page limit. So the project description should be self-contained and not include URLs that would ask reviewers to leave the description to view an external site. Reviewers are under no obligation to view an external site. The information on that site could circumvent your page limitations, or the sites could be altered or gone between submission and review. You'll want to make sure to follow grant guidelines for what the project description should address. The project description must begin with results from prior NSF support if it's applicable. As the majority of you are new to NSF funding, this would not be applicable, but if any PI or co-PI identified on the project has received NSF funding, including current funding, in the past 5 years, information on that award is required, whether or not the support is directly related to your proposal, and you'll need to include a summary of the specific outcomes that came out of that funding. So though not required, this would be a good place to list your participation in Mentor Connect to help gain some visibility for your efforts in working in this program. So your project description would start with results of prior support, under which you can indicate you have no prior support, but you're a participant in the Mentor Connect program, or you would, again, list any prior support if that was applicable. Biographical sketches. So biosketches are required for each individual on a proposal identified as senior personnel, including PIs or co-PIs. And the biosketches should be uploaded as single PDFs or entered as text for each individual senior personnel. Actually, it's just PDFs. So you'll want to read the guidelines, as NSF has a very specific format for the biosketches. So again, you'll want to consult the PAPPG. It's a good idea to create a template for these biosketches if asking senior personnel to complete them so they can put their information into the required format. And Mentor Connect has examples of biosketches in its resources for you to reference as well. You'll want to complete these as soon as possible. This is something that can be completed and uploaded into Fastlane while you continue to work on other parts of your proposal. So this is one you can easily get out of the way. So biosketches must include the following components that address education and experience to run the grant project. You would not include any personal contact information, but you would list professional preparation, so the undergraduate, graduate, postdoctoral institutions, if applicable, including the location of the institution, major's degree, and year. Any appointments listed in reverse chronological order of all the individual's academic and professional appointments beginning with current employment. Products or publications, a list of up to 5 products that most closely relate to the proposed project that are citable, such as publications, data sets, software patents. The list must include full citation information. If your product section only includes publications, you can change the heading from products to publications. And if you do not have products or publications, that is okay, as this biosketch format has been created to serve the needs of the research community applying for NSF funding. So it's okay if you don't have anything to list in this section. Synergistic activities, so a list of up to 5 activities that demonstrate the broader impact of the individual's professional and or scholarly activities as it relates to the program activities being suggested by the proposal. So this is the place to demonstrate the skills and assets that the individual holds. Some examples of things you might include in this category are innovations in teaching and training, such as development of curricular models, broadening the participation of groups underrepresented in STEM, or service to the scientific and engineering community outside of the individual's immediate organization. If you worked as a subrecipient of an ATE Centers grant, you're working with other ATE projects as primary partners, or if you have an individual membership or participation in a professional society, such as the Council on Undergraduate Research, for example. Now I would like to turn it over to Elaine to talk about current and pending support.
Thanks, Ellen. NSF wants personnel working on grants to have dedicated time to do this work. So current and pending support forms are required. The current and pending support forms show NSF how much of your time is committed or will be committed to funded projects. This reporting includes projects supported by all funding sources and not just NSF. The expectation is that a person working on a grant either be paid directly by the grant for the portion of his or her time that is dedicated to grant work, or that the person be released from a portion of his or her workload to do grant work. When release time is used, grant funds may be used to pay replacement faculty or other personnel. A combination of these payment methods is possible. For example, a faculty member may receive release time during the academic year, but be paid directly to work on the grant in the summer when he or she may not normally be under contract to the college. Anyone serving in a PI, co-PI, or senior personnel role must have current and pending support forms included in the proposal. This includes anyone working on the grant in one of these roles who is paid by your college, even if the person is not an employee of the college. How the person is paid, as an employee or as a consultant, is not important. The person's leadership role in the grant triggers the requirement for current and pending support forms. It is important to know what NSF means by current and pending. Current refers to grants already awarded, not the one you're currently preparing. A pending proposal is one that either hasn't yet been submitted or a proposal that's been submitted but for which the funding decision is not yet known. The proposal you have in progress now for October submission is a pending grant for preparing current and pending support forms. Now let's talk about how many of these support forms you will need to prepare. For each person, there must be a current and pending support form for each proposed or ongoing project for which the person has a time commitment, including the proposal you're preparing. This means that every person included in your proposal in a PI, co-PI, or senior personnel role will have at least one current and pending support form, even if this is your first NSF ATE proposal. The Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, referred to as the APPG that you've heard several times today, tells us that the current and pending support forms must include all current project support from whatever source. The PAPPG cites as examples federal, state, local, or foreign government agencies, public or private foundations, industrial or other commercial organizations. Please note that the PAPPG also states that the proposed project and all other projects or activities requiring a portion of time of the PI or senior personnel must be included, even if the person will receive no salary support from the project. If this is your first grant, you may have only one current and pending support form for each person serving in a principal investigator or other senior personnel role. However, check to be sure that these individuals are not working on other funded projects, such as Department of Labor grants, state-funded grants, or foundation-funded grants that will need to be reported. Now, let's talk about the information that you will need to supply on the current and pending support forms. There is a template in FastLane for preparing current and pending support forms. This is what the template looks like in FastLane. The process goes more quickly if you collect all of the information you will need prior to completing the form. I will walk you through each line for which you will be supplying information. Also check and double check prior to proposal submission to make sure that the information you submit in the current and pending support form is consistent with the information you provide elsewhere in the proposal. The budget, for example, is one place where you will indicate the time commitment of personnel. NSF will check to make sure that the time commitment reported is consistent across these forms and is done correctly. You will need to supply the following information for each project and person for whom a form is completed. The project or proposal title. You will want to put the title. Charlotte talked to you a little bit about titles earlier of the proposal that you're going to submit, or the title of any previously funded project or one that's pending funding. Your source of support is asking who is currently funding or who will be asked to fund the project. Typical sources include the National Science Foundation, Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Education, a state such as California, or a foundation such as the Lumina Foundation. The project location is your institution's location or the location of the organization currently implementing a previously funded award if you are doing work on a project not based at your college. The total award amount will be the total budget being requested or the grant amount already awarded. For your proposal that you're working on now, that's one line that you may need to go back and check at the end, because typically you're adjusting your budget up until the last minute. The start date is the actual start date for already funded grants, or the anticipated or requested start date for your new project should it be funded. The end date should be the assigned or anticipated end date of the project. The support type is where you indicate either current or pending. And then you're supposed to give the person months per year committed to the project for the person. This is where the majority of mistakes get made. For this reason, I will be providing a couple of examples to reemphasize some points. Person months per year committed to the project is the way you report a person's time commitment to a project. As you will see in the note at the bottom of this page, the question is not the time span of the grant work, like the grant's going on for a full 12 months of the year, but rather how much of a person's time within a time span that the person will work on the project. This time commitment will need to be translated into person months. Person months must be reported with only one decimal place, so you may need to round off your calculated numbers when reporting. There are 3 options organized into 2 categories for reporting time. Person months are to be reported in one category or the other, never in both. The first category is calendar. This category is typically used for 12-month staff who work on the project, usually year-round. Person months reported in this category are most often associated with salaried personnel who work a percentage of time, such as 10% or 30%, throughout the 12-month calendar year. The second category includes academic and summer. This category should be used for faculty. Faculty typically work on academic year contracts. Some faculty also work during summer on a summer contract. The academic and summer boxes are provided to report this time in person months. To determine person months for faculty requires some calculation, unless the person is being supported 100% by a grant, which is rare. Since this reporting of person months on current and pending support forms and on budgets is very often done incorrectly, let's go through a couple of examples. In the first example, we have a 12-month employee who dedicates 10% of his or her time to grant work. The number you should put in the current and pending support form is 1.2 calendar months, which is 10% of 12 months. Note that you report time in months and using only one decimal place. If you have made an entry in the calendar box, leave the other 2 boxes blank. Fight the urge to put numbers in all 3 boxes. Next, consider a faculty member who is working on an academic contract. Typically, these contracts are for 9 months, but may vary by institution. This is where your math skills will be needed because all time must be listed in months. Some translation will be required. For example, if a faculty member typically teaches 5 courses per semester, and this person will be provided 1 course release time to work on the grant both fall and spring semesters, that is considered 1/5 of the person's workload, or 20% release time, academic, referring to the academic year. Calculate 20% of the months covered by the academic year contract and report that in the academic box on the form. In this example, I assumed a 9-month contract, a full-time teaching load of 5 classes, and 1 course release time per semester to be provided by the grant. This will be 1.8 person months for the 9-month academic year. If release time for this person is just for 1 semester, then you would report half as much time in months. 1 course release time for 1 semester is 0.9 person months. You would enter 0.9 in the academic box on the form. Now let's consider a situation where a teacher who had 1 course release time for both fall and spring semesters will also work on the grant in the summer. Again, you must determine the time the person will work on the grant in terms of months and will report this in the summer box option. For example, the summertime commitment could be 2 weeks or a half a month, which will be reported as 0.5 person months. You enter 0.5 in the summer box on the form. If a faculty member is scheduled to work on the project only in the summer, then you put the person months in the summer box and leave the academic box empty. With faculty, therefore, it is possible to have time reported for both the academic and summer options. In the case of faculty, time may be reported in either or both options. The person months for the academic and summer options added together must not add up to more than 12 months. I will stress one more time that if you've entered a person months in the calendar box in reporting project time for an individual, under no circumstances should you also report academic or summertime for the same person on the same project. There should always be at least one of 3 boxes left blank, and sometimes 2. Once you complete all of your current and pending support forms, then FastLane produces a form that looks like this example. In this case, from Interconnect co-PI Dennis Faber, he was working on the first MentorConnect grant when the proposal for the second MentorConnect grant was submitted. Therefore, he has 1 entry for pending support and 1 for current support. An individual working on multiple projects will end up with a form with several entries like this. Again, NSF will be looking to see what the total time commitment is for an individual across all projects. Just to recap, one of the most frequent errors seen on current and pending support forms is mixing calendar year months with academic and/or summer months. Just don't do that. Although the PAPPG mentions limiting faculty time to 2 summer months, this is not an expectation for ATE grants. Having faculty supported throughout the year is important in the ATE program. Even so, an important point about personnel time on grants is that it needs to be reasonable and aligned with the work that the person will be doing. Reviewers expect to see key personnel included in the budget with compensation for time they devote to grant work. Beware of having personnel donate time to grant-funded projects. For one thing, reviewers will not believe that the scope of work can be completed without some grant-supported personnel named who have specific responsibilities for that scope of work. Reviewers will be looking for faculty time and budget to support that time. Also, donated time may be considered voluntary committed cost sharing, which is prohibited. One note about faculty overloads that are so common in the community college environment. NSF will allow faculty overload pay for those working on grants as long as the workload is consistent with college policy and the policy applies to all faculty and not just those working on the grant. This is a change from previous years. If it is anticipated that faculty who will be working on the grant will receive overload pay, the budget and budget justification for your proposal will need to provide specifics about this, and the college policy should be referenced in your budget justification. Another form to be filled out is the Facilities, Equipment, and Other Resources form. This form provides an opportunity to explain the infrastructure, laboratories, equipment at your institution, and perhaps at partner locations that will be available for use to support the success of your project. You may also mention personnel as part of other resources. With this form, you should focus on equipment, infrastructure, and personnel that will or might be important to your project. It isn't necessary to describe all of the capabilities of your college. It can be distracting to reviewers if the descriptions do not seem to have a bearing on the project that's been proposed. NSF instructions state that in order for NSF and its reviewers to assess the scope of a proposed project, all organizational resources necessary for and available to a project must be described in the Facilities, Equipment, and Other Resources section of the proposal. The NSF Grant Proposal Guide further states that proposers should include an aggregated description of the internal and external resources, both physical and personnel, that the organization and its collaborators will provide to the project, should it be funded. Such information must be provided in this section in lieu of other parts of the proposal, such as your budget justification or project description. The description should be narrative in nature and must not include any quantifiable financial information. And that is a direct quote. Note that the instructions specifically tell you not to assign monetary value to the items listed and described in this form. If you have personnel who will devote time to the project but will not be included in the budget, this is a good place to include this information. Now to the form itself. The form offers the following categories for submitting information: laboratory, clinical, animal, computer, office, other, and major equipment. For ATE grants, the clinical and animal categories are typically not applicable, and you may indicate this on the form, as it has been done on the example on the screen. Laboratory support is quite often important for successful implementation of an ATE grant. If this is the case for your project, you will want to describe your current capability even if the proposal includes some improvements or equipment additions. Computer capability can also be essential for your grant, especially if the project focuses on information technology, cybersecurity, and any number of other advanced technologies that are computer dependent and will make use of the computing capability and computer labs at the institution. Office support is also important to describe, since budget guidelines specifically state that grant budgets may not include office furnishing or everyday office equipment such as copiers, computers, and items that support normal office operations. The personnel implementing the grant, however, will definitely need office support to do so. If your institution is providing dedicated office space, access to administrative support, or similar, this is a good place to make a statement about this support. Other is the section where you can describe resources other than facilities and equipment, such as personnel support. For example, this is the place where you could describe internal talent that you have assembled to serve as an internal advisory committee. Or perhaps you have a college recruiter lined up who will support the outreach activities of the grant, but who will not receive compensation from the grant for doing so. A third example of personnel you may want to describe in this section could be an institutional research person who will help with internal evaluation and data collection. In other words, if someone will be working to support the project without compensation, this is the place to describe that donated time, but don't assign monetary value to that donated time. And the major equipment can be an important category for some ATE grants. Advanced technology programs are very often equipment intensive. Your institution may have major equipment that will be used in implementing the grant, or you may have a partner university or industry working with the project and providing major equipment for your students. Perhaps you have a university or industry partner with, for example, an electron microscope or clean room that will be used for teaching your students. If major equipment is involved in the success of your project, this is the place where you can describe the availability of these resources. I think you can see that the Facilities, Equipment, and Other Resources form gives you an opportunity to share information that you can't fully describe elsewhere in your proposal. The final set of ancillary materials for your proposal, known as supplementary documents. This is where you can include additional information to support your proposal, but carefully follow the guidelines for appropriate documents to include. Program solicitations can be very specific in this regard. Now let's talk a little about the references cited. NSF expects you to do some research in the process of developing a grant proposal. Like most funding sources, they encourage the use of research-based strategies and adaptation and implementation from previously funded NSF ATE or other funded projects. Your references indicate that you have investigated what others have done that worked. You will want to cite references that explain outcomes that led you to select a particular strategy, curriculum, teaching methodology, or other promising or proven approach to address your challenges in technician education. Reference citations are also used to cite the sources of data that you will provide in describing your project rationale or results of prior support. As you include information from your research, here is one tip to keep in mind, and Ellen mentioned this earlier. You will want to manually number your references throughout the project description and then prepare a separate document with citations that correspond to those numbers. This separate document will then be uploaded into FastLane. References are a separate section of the proposal and do not count towards your 15-page project description. I suggest that you manually number your references as you work, because if you use the automated endnotes, your citations will automatically be included in your 15-page project description, and this is not where they belong and take up part of the 15 pages you need for something else. I've seen proposals that had the references included in the 15 pages and again in the references section, and it just comes across as sloppy work and not paying attention. So be sure you handled your references cited correctly. Now let's talk a minute about the data management plan. Including a data management plan is a requirement for ATE proposals. You must prepare a supplementary document of no more than 2 pages that is labeled Data Management Plan. This supplement should describe how the proposal will conform to NSF policy on the dissemination and sharing of research results. In essence, NSF expects you to share the outcomes of your work, and timely publication of results is encouraged. However, there are considerations of privacy, confidentiality, intellectual property, or other rights. The data management plan provides an opportunity for you to describe the care that will be taken in this regard. Your data management plan should specify the types of data and other materials and products that will be generated or collected by the project, how that data will be stored, protected, and appropriately shared, how what is generated by the project will be preserved during and beyond the project, and how others will be able to access these project products. The data management plan will be reviewed as an integral part of the proposal. This sample data management plan was prepared for a small grant for institutions new to ATE. I encourage you to visit the link on the screen for additional guidance on how to develop your data management plan. As daunting as the instructions for producing a data management plan sound, the plan need not be more than a page, especially for smaller projects. Now, I'm going to turn it back over to Ellen to talk about other supplementary documents for your proposal.
Thank you, Elaine. So the only required supplemental documents are a data management plan, which Elaine just covered, and a list of all of the known people aside from participants and students who will receive compensation from the project and their affiliation, which would need to be uploaded under other supplementary documents. So you'll need to create and provide a list of all of the people receiving compensation from the project, aside from the participants and their affiliations. Note that some of these people may not be from your college. And this is an area to really look for consistency. This list needs to be consistent with the budget and budget justification you submit, with what's in your project description and in your current and pending support forms. So in other words, you don't want someone listed in the supplemental document whose function hasn't been addressed somewhere else in the project description and budget. And letters of commitment, while not required, it's a good idea to obtain a few well-chosen letters of commitment for your proposal. And the key word here is commitment. Reviewers want to see documentation of the commitments described in the proposal, such as a letter from an industry partner, pledging resources or time to the project. And letters of commitment should outline specific collaborations, partnerships, or resources and not merely be letters of support. Letters that just endorse the project or offer non-specific support should not be included. And you'll want to be aware of boilerplate and templates for letters. Reviewers do notice if you have a solid proposal but 5 identical letters of commitment, it just doesn't look good, and it actually calls into question the real level of commitment on behalf of those partners. Examples of other supplemental documents that you could include, if you're proposing to revamp a curriculum and have already created one of those modules, you might want to update it, or you might want to include that sample. Or if you're conducting a professional development workshop and you've developed a draft agenda for the workshop, this would be a place you could include that as well. Just be careful not to go over 30 pages. Reviewers are not required to read over that amount, and it's discouraged. You also note that any supplemental documents need to adhere to the same font and page formatting requirements as the project description. And supplementary documents can be uploaded into this section of Fastlane as a PDF file. So in addition to the supplemental documents, there's also one single copy document that you need to complete for collaborators and other affiliations. So this is also something that is you would upload. It's required for all senior personnel. You would need to provide a list of each individual identified as senior project personnel. You would need to provide a list for all the people in alphabetical order who are currently or have been collaborators or co-authors with the individual on a project, a book, an article, a report, an abstract, or paper during the 48 months preceding the submission of the proposal. And also include those individuals who are currently or have been co-editors of a journal, compendium, or conference proceedings during the 24 months preceding the submission of the proposal. So this is a place you would list those collaborators and those other affiliations for each senior personnel. And if there are no collaborators or co-editors to report, this should also be indicated. And this is really something that NSF looks at when they're selecting review panels, so there's no conflict of interest in reviewers that they might select to review your proposal. So just some general advice. You will want to start early and review what you've written several times. You've obvious to say, but you don't want to get into a time crunch the night before proposal submission, and you'll want to take the time to plan out your proposal, write it, and review it, and have those that are outside the work that you do read it as well and make sure it makes sense. And the key thing is not to be afraid to ask questions of your mentors or the Mentor Connect team. If we have the answers, if we don't have the answers, we'll find you the answers, and there are no stupid questions. So please feel free to ask any and all questions. And with that, I'm going to actually turn to a question break so we can address some of those that have come into chat and any additional ones you want to submit at this time.
All right.
Charlotte,
thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, thank you, Ellen and Elaine. We've gone over quite a bit of content so far in the webinar, but we definitely want to address some of your questions and maybe even recap on some of those that came into the chat box and were addressed in the chat box. One in particular, we had a question from the audience from two participants and one was from Matthew and the other from Cheryl, and I think it's just worth highlighting. Is there a practical threshold of significance for these, referring to the current and pending support forms? For example, if a faculty member has a number of other grant funds or another grant that they're putting work towards, say 3 to 5 hours, and then Cheryl asked on the flip side, if I'm a dean or have a different role at the college, how do I record that time on pending support? And Ellen answered it perfectly by stating that, and just for clarification for all, the PAP guide does state that current and pending support forms are required, must include all current and project support. That's federal, state, local government agencies, as well as public or private foundation funding. And she clarified that regular duties that are not a part of the project-based proposal that you're submitting, such as serving as a dean, would not be included. And then other clarification on that is that if you are a PI, co-PI, or senior personnel, that those current and pending support forms must be completed for the project that you are initiating.
I'll help you. Just probably can figure it out.
We had a great question come in from Vicky. She asked, is the facilities, equipment, and other resources form a required form that you enter as you go, or is it a downloadable PDF? I'll answer that, and basically that is a form that you are inputting information. However, I believe that Fastlane will allow you to upload an additional PDF, for example, should you have more than what the form is allowing for input. But most of the time you're going to input that information directly into the form. We have a question from Mike, and he is asking, can we suggest reviewers for our proposal? If so, how would we do that? And Elaine or Ellen, if I could throw that out to you, more experienced team members.
Okay, I'll chime in on that. In the ATE program, you should not recommend reviewers. The panel review selection process does not incorporate your suggestions. So if you put them, they'll just ignore them. This particular feature is applicable to the research directorates, where they, some of the scientists are working on extraordinarily specific scientific research, and there may just be, a finite number of people in the country who would even understand enough to be able to review their proposal for its merits. And so that's why it's in there. It really doesn't apply to ATE, so I wouldn't spend any time filling that out.
All right, thank you. And we have a question in the chat box related to products, the product section of, say, Biosketches. And the question posed is, if there are no products, do we exclude that section? Or do we include the section heading and then like a not applicable statement? Just to briefly answer that, you would basically not include that information on your Biosketch if it's not applicable. You would move to the next section and input data as you continue on in the process. Any other feedback on that, Ellen or Elaine, in your experience?
Oh, I agree. There's, if you don't have anything to put in it, you don't need to include it.
Yeah,
there are
again,
other places.
No, go ahead.
It's, we did say in other places, like in the budget, if if there's a budget category and you don't have any expenses there, it's a good idea to put none or not applicable. But in this case, there's really no purpose for putting it. Go ahead, Ellen.
No, I was going to agree, and I was going to say a lot of that, again, is really focused on the research community, where they would have a lot of publications or products that would need to be listed. So if it's not applicable, you just wouldn't use the heading and wouldn't put anything there. So I agree.
Thank you, ladies. And I'll address a couple more questions here, and we'll move into a portion of the conclusion. But Cheryl has brought up a really good point, and I think this is a great time for a little bit of clarification. She's talking in terms of current and pending support. She's wondering if only projects that faculty or dean are paid for a grant, are these people filling out the form? For example, our dean often has many projects she works on that are not funded by grants but are considered projects. This is a really good example of where current and pending support, and I'm not going to go into it because that's a different piece, but Current and pending support is essentially identifying how much time a person in a leadership role will spend on a grant, and should a grant be funded, this current and pending support is just documentation for what's called time and effort. And so, Cheryl, to answer your question, in your case or in your dean's case, you would put in, again, you would not include information about her time as a dean on current and pending support, but should your grant be funded, there will be a different process for that, and it's included in what's called time and effort. I'll keep that short. Hope that helps, Cheryl.
I think the question here is external funding. You may have projects going on in the college, but if you've got externally funded projects, they really don't want people to be more than 100% funded by external funding sources. And that, they have done some audits in the past and discovered that they did have people on grant funds that were, supported at 150% of what their normal workload would be, and that's just not acceptable. So this is just one way of tracking that. So if it's part of your normal workload, on a time and effort report, you divide it into categories where you would list the time that's being funded by external sources, and then you can essentially lump all your normal college work into another category called college work, or whatever your job title is. So there's several ways of handling it, but they're really looking at the external funding for special projects coming into your college and that an individual is assigned to.
Awesome. And we'll address the last two questions and we will move forward. Can the project evaluator be someone from inside the university, or is it someone from the outside? And quick answer to that is it can be either or. Based on your project goals, objectives, etc. If you have someone at your institution who is willing to provide evaluation help, sometimes folks use their institutional research or folks. You're welcome to do that, and but most people do go outside of the college, and there's an evaluation webinar that I can provide you a link, Teresa, to get some more comprehensive information on that. And then
the strongest
lastly,
position to take on that, I would recommend, is a combination, using your internal research people to help you with internal evaluation, we call it, and then getting somebody external to the organization to provide support to. In very large organizations, there may be the capacity in some division very separate from where the grant work is going on. The requirement is that the person must be external to the project. And so you're going to have to build a case for somebody internal to your organization being external to that project if you go totally internally. Most people choose an external evaluator, but often share that responsibility between internal and external. There's some real advantages to having those external eyes on what you're doing.
Absolutely. And thank you, Elaine. And everybody, we really appreciate these questions. We love doing the live webinars because it does give us a chance to dialogue with you and answer some of those. And if you have more questions, please feel free to let us know. And with that, I just want to highlight that the Mentor Connect project does offer several resources in a resource library, and it specifically provides solutions to grant proposal writing needs for the ATE program. If you visit our website and click on Visit Our Library to search for different things, you can search for different things like samples, templates, and even a repository of frequently asked questions. Of course, these are not the only resources, but based on some of your questions today, we think that that repository would help you along in your grant proposal writing process. We also like to for you to connect with us. You know, if you have questions that may not have been addressed or you did not want to share today, there are a number of ways to get in touch with us. Send us an email, visit us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. Even check these webinars. They are archived and available on our YouTube channel. And most importantly, call or email us. We do provide just-in-time help to answer your questions. If you have colleagues who missed this production, again, slides and the full presentation will be available on all of these social media and websites. And on behalf of our project team, we'd like to thank you for your participation and your attention for this webinar, and we hope that you'll connect with us, and we'll look forward to serving you. We value your feedback, and so as you leave the webinar today, we would love it if you would take just a moment to complete our short evaluation survey. With that, we'd like to thank Elaine and Ellen for their participation. We'd like to thank Maytech Networks for all that they do to help us facilitate, and we hope to talk to you in the near future. So thank you all. Have a great day.